Hey there, welcome to Unsolicited Book Reviews with Michael David MacBride. That's me. Typically, this is the part where I would introduce what the books are or tell you how I stumble upon these books or whatever. But in this case, it's a very special episode where I have a conversation with the illustrator who illustrated my new book, which is called Who Gives a Duck? It's a adult book, but it's a picture book about ducks struggling with relationships and fertility issues. And Leslie Ritenour, the illustrator, was nice enough to join me and tolerate all my questions. So um, let's go. So thanks for joining us today. I am talking to Leslie Ritenour, who is the illustrator of our book, Who Gives a Duck, which is coming out September 10th, although you'll be able to buy them through the Salty Books Pub website starting next week. So people can start
Yay.
ordering these and we can get feedback and see what people think about it. But I wanted to chat with Leslie because weirdly enough, we've only met in person one time, and it was very briefly as I was handing her a copy of her book. And so, Leslie, tell me a bit about yourself. Like, where'd you come from? What's your background story, your origin? Any of those things you feel like sharing?
Yeah, so originally I'm from Wisconsin, even though ironically enough, I was born in Minnesota. So that's kind of just like where I'm from. I come from like the Western Edge. If people recognize it, I come from Colfax, Wisconsin, which is a teeny tiny town, but people reference it as a village, even though I'm like, okay. Um, I started off drawing when I was actually very, very young. My mom was the one who inspired me. I like stumbled upon her art in her closet that she had like tucked away, and it was like Marvel, like comic, like sketches and stuff like that, because she was really into them. Um,
Were you
and
snooping around? Like, did you just find it accident?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I accidentally found them and I was like, "What are these, Mom?" And she goes, "Oh, yeah, those are just like some like drawings that I did when I was younger because I was really into comics." And I was like, "But what if I could do that?" Because I was like really attached to like what my parents would do. And I was like, "Ooh, art." And then I just like started like drawing and I was like, "This ain't turning out right." Because you're just like 7 and it's like 7-year-old art and you're like, this is great, but not it. But then eventually, as I got older, I was drawing in my classes to where my teachers would yell at me and be like, hey, pay attention. I'm like, I am paying attention, but I'm also like working on something. So I'd be drawing art in class, and then eventually I would like try to make comics and stuff. And I snuck one of my comics that wasn't even finished into the school library, and I had like some random kids approach me and go, "Hey, did you make this?" And I went, yeah, I sure did."
Did they try
Um,
to check it out or did they just take it out of the library? Like, I don't know what would happen if I found something in the library. I'd assume I'd go up to the desk and try to check it out.
I'm not entirely sure, but every now and then I would get a comment being like, "I found it," and I'm like, "Oh, it's still there. Oh, okay." I feel like eventually they took it out, but I thought it was like a neat relic that I'd stick in there to
That's
like
so funny.
be like, "That's me."
I grew
Um,
up in a small town in Michigan, and so kind of similar things where I wanted to draw. I've always doodled,
mhm.
and in probably in middle school, I think I really fell in love with comics, and
Yeah.
I feel a bit like a poser to say I'm a comics fan because I really was. It was really Spider-Man, X-Men, The Punisher. Like those were the three that I subscribed to, and they would come to me in the mail because we didn't have a proper bookstore, and the place that sold comics had like one of the spinner racks, but they didn't bother refilling them. So like I would get like X-Men 201, and then the next one I would get would be like 227, and I'd be like, what happened in between there? So I
Yeah.
signed up for a subscription, and I used to draw little figures. And actually, in probably sixth and seventh grade, I had a friend Joel, and we would draw a frame of a comic and then pass it to the other one in class. And then by the end, we'd have this whole little mini comic book. But it sounds like you were kind of doing it on your own. Did you have friends who were collaborating with you at
Yeah.
all, or?
Uh, from time to time, I would be drawing my friends and be like, "Hey, let's do like that back and forth thing like you were talking about, where we would draw like a piece of like our own characters and just like doodle on it, and it would be come out as like this corrupt creature at the end of it." So yeah, I definitely feel you on like the back and forth because that's what my friends at the time would do. And then also with the library thing, I I feel you on that because I would get like manga from there and they would have like 1 through 4 and then I was like, "But wait, I know there's more." And they'd go, "It's not there. Sorry."
Yeah.
So, yeah,
It's
I
hard. It's
definitely
hard
feel you
being
on
in a
that.
small town like that where you don't
Yeah.
have, a lot of money in the library, and the librarians are doing the best they can to keep
Mhm.
everybody, as up on books as they'd like. But
Yeah.
obviously, they'd like a bigger budget, I'm sure. So,
Yeah.
well,
I think eventually over time they did get more in because I've gone back there maybe like 5 years ago. Because when I was getting books, I was like 7, so that's like over 10 years now. Their section that they have now is just like twice as big, and I'm like, nice.
yeah, it's been kind of awesome to watch the explosion of a lot of those things. Like I live in Scott County, Minnesota, and
Mhm.
the library there has a robust, collection of comics. I mean, it's got its own graphic novel, and then it's like broken into subsections. Like at the time, like it was all just like, well, if you want the graphic things, they're over there in this one mass of everything kind of meshed together. But here it's like manga, here you got DC, here you got
Yeah,
Marvel, and they're all in their own subsections. I was just like,
yeah,
holy crap, where was this when I was a kid?
yeah, exactly. That's how I thought. I was just like, huh, this
Yeah.
is cool, but what?
So did any of those characters that you created then, did they carry through to your work? Like was it a defining style? Like if you look at that then and your work now, is there some kind of
Yeah,
recollection?
so growing up, I was heavily influenced by like illustrations from like Japan, so like anime, manga, and that's kind of where I started. I got like one of those like how to draw anime books, and I was like, okay, cool. But eventually I started delving off into my own style, going into that semi-realistic, semi like cartoony look to where in my illustrations they look real, but they're also not real. Like they have their own unique factor. Um, Another thing too that I explored was color. I feel like when I was younger, I was just like, this looks good together, maybe. And now I have like a better understanding of it to where I can like understand color theory and go, this works with this and looks cool. And also, that's not actually what the color is because XYZ. So that's kind of like the difference. Um, Another thing too is I had that like kid thing where I was like drawing it where it's like the hair covers one eye, and I was
Sure.
like, I can't draw the other eye. But now I can. I can do that.
It's funny
I've
those
grown.
things that are kind of your bane, like I know a lot of people complain about feet and hands,
Yeah,
and
that's another thing I had.
eyes and noses are often difficult. Yeah, it's funny, like the features that you just kind of take for granted, but when you try to reproduce it, you're like, it doesn't look right. It looks blocky, or my thumbs somehow end up on the outside of my hands instead of on the insides.
Yeah,
uh,
I remember when I was in high school, I had drawn this really cool piece of work, and then I realized the hand, I had put the thumb on the wrong side, and I was like, ouch.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So I'm curious. I don't know a lot about anime and manga other
Mhm.
than my youngest son Parker. He really enjoys them. So like I get little bits and pieces through him. But I'm kind of curious. Like what were some of the things you were reading that you were interested in, or were there artists that you followed, or
Yeah, so around like the age of like 10, I was reading from the manga at the library. I don't really remember the names anymore because it's just been so long and they're just like so old now.
sure?
But over time, I had started going digital with things. Like I was
Oh,
playing
cool.
Roblox at the time, so I started going, ooh, different artists and stuff like that. And I would draw on the website for that as well, because my I convinced my parents to get me like a digital tablet that I could draw on, and I was like, yes, I'm so
Nice.
cool now. Um, but then I got hooked on like Tumblr and DeviantArt, which has a bunch of different artists on there. And um there's an artist that I still follow now through like Instagram and stuff like that, named Mew Tripled. She has very like a cartoony look to her style. Um, there's also, oh gosh, trying to think of like a bunch of different artists. But yeah, I would get it through like DeviantArt and like those art websites. And the nice thing about social media now is I can just stumble upon art like none other. I oftentimes don't remember the artist name. Sorry, slacking as my own self artist. But that's usually where I find them and I go, "Oh, look at that. That's so cool." And then I show my boyfriend and he goes, "Oh my gosh, that's great."
I do love just how readily available art is and how there are like
Yes.
these little niche kind of art communities. Like you said, like the
Mhm.
Deviant Art. One of the illustrators I had used for one of, actually, she was a former student of mine, but she was on DeviantArt, and I know that was like a real boon to her because she was able to try things out and get feedback,
Yeah.
and people follow and they share things, and they kind of learn from each other, and they kind of get a, I mean, often as a writer, as a creative person, like I'm looking for that sense of community, and it's kind of hard to find sometimes. So it's neat that there are some of these
Yeah.
channels that you found like that that help. But
Yeah.
cool. So I'm curious, what is the origin story of your handle then? So I found you at the coffee shop. I just
Mhm.
happened to be at the coffee shop, and there's this little pillar of art and local artisans, and I see the little card that said Baby Bean Lettuce. And to me, like, one, the art spoke to me because there are little stickers of animals, and I was thinking about this
Yeah.
duck book that I had in mind. And then two, like the name was very memorable. So I'm just kind of curious, how do you come up with that?
Yeah, so initially I was trying to create like a business like a little bit more than a year ago. And previously I had handles before, but I was like, no, I don't want like they're too niche that I was like, I just want to separate from them. But another thing was people are suggesting using like my real name. And I was like, yes, but if like things go awry, I was like, do I want to be associated with myself?
Sure.
So then I decided, okay, what are some things about me that are interesting that just like click? So I settled on the baby part because people think I'm small and tiny. And then another thing is for the bean part, my boyfriend, as like a nickname, calls me Bean because also small and tiny. But then the lettuce part comes from it's a nickname that I received from my friend's mom
Oh,
when she
okay.
was trying to say my name by accident and said lettuce because she had different things on mine, I'm guessing. And my friend told me that, and I was like, that's good. That's really funny. So I was like, oh, I'll just use lettuce. And that's where I was like, oh, baby bean lettuce. And
You
that's
know,
where it stemmed from.
it really works because they are three distinct words. They're memorable. They're easy to
Mhm.
pronounce. Like um, sometimes I know, like I see people's web pages, and
Yeah.
it makes sense as separate words, but when you run them together, it's hard to know where the one word ends and the next one
Mhm.
begins. And so like, oh, baby bean lettuce works for me, and
Yeah.
it was kind of cute and funny, and I was trying to picture like what a baby bean lettuce would look like.
Don't worry, I'm still like trying to decide like a logo and stuff. And I'm like, where do I even begin? Like, what feature do I start on? I know
Yeah.
eventually it'll come to me, but I'm just like, huh?
So you've described your style as starting kind of with anime and manga, but
Mhm.
for me, like I don't know. I mean, I definitely see that in some of your like figure art. Like when I look
Yes.
at the ducks you've drawn,
Mhm.
they look And I love Vern and his googly eyes for sure. Um, I don't, it's hard to describe the style because it is realistic. I mean, you did a really wonderful job of capturing the
Mhm.
essence of wood ducks and their coloring and their markings. And um, I don't know. It's interesting to think of like those different influences. Are there other what other art inspired you, I guess, outside of the anime and manga?
So I also watched a lot of like cartoons growing up, so I guess that's a big influence.
Sure.
Where I was watching like what were they? There's Billy and Mandy, Courage the Cowardly Dog, Chowder. Chowder's a good one. Just like cartoony creatures that really came to me. And then I when it came to doing creatures and stuff, I was like, I haven't really drawn animals before. And I like realistic animals, but I was like, what if they look silly? That's kind of started where I took it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, and the
yeah.
personifying of them. I mean, you bring human
Yeah.
characteristics to them, and that I mean that definitely makes them look unique, and
Yeah.
it embodies some of those aspects that we wanted, in terms of these ducks struggling with very real human situations. So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
um,
another thing too that
sure.
when I draw animals is I really love giving them like humanoid facial expressions in a way to where it's just like, oh, I can understand what's going on even though I don't speak animal. Um, and yeah.
Yeah, I remember actually I think it was one of the stickers I saw
Yeah.
originally of yours was the alligator, and like
Mhm.
he looked kind of befuddled. And I was
Yeah.
just, I don't know, it's usually alligators like seem like they have no, I don't, I'm a fan of reptiles.
Yeah.
So I look at them and I see a lot more, but I think generally people look at them and, maybe they think they're smiling or,
Mhm.
they're lacking emotion because they're reptiles and whatever. But I love the idea that there was something that was puzzling this alligator.
Yeah.
And, he was maybe not having the best day. So,
Yeah.
but yeah. Um, so I am curious because I haven't ever asked you why. What did you think? I guess when I approached you about illustrating the book, because I come at you with this kind of goofy book that is, some of the people have asked me like, who's the audience for it, and it's like I don't know that I would like this book, and actually some of the other people that I've talked with enjoy the idea of an adult picture book dealing with like serious issues and but as an artist, I'm kind of curious. Like I came at you with the script and kind of vague ideas. Like what were your first thoughts or what drew you to the project?
Yeah, initially, okay, when I first got the email, I was just like trying to decide if it was a scam or not.
That
Ironically
is the
enough.
modern day problem, isn't it?
And I
Right?
was just like, wait, is this like someone wants me to art for their book? So I was just like, okay, time to implore more. Because I was like, if it is an opportunity, we're yes. But initially when I read it, I was just like, this is good. I like this. Like, I was going piece by piece and I was just like thinking in my head like what I could do it for it. And I was just like, ooh, I could come up with something so chaotic for some of these moments. It would be good. And it was nice because with it being like an adult book, I was like, I have some liberty here for some chaotic moments. So I was just like, this is nice. Like approaching this is real good.
Yeah, well, and I'm definitely glad you answered the email because that is a very real concern. I mean, I get things all the time inviting
Yeah.
me to like a conference in, San Juan, and I'm like, I'm pretty sure you got the wrong person, or this is some kind of scam or something,
Yeah.
and but you never know. So I'm glad you did your due
Yeah.
diligence.
Yeah, I did some research and I was like, okay, this seems real.
Yeah, and it was fun watching the characters come to life. I mean,
Mhm.
it's funny. I am definitely I'm even though I do like drawing and I
Mhm.
love illustrations and comics and things in general, I weirdly when I write, I don't have a specific vision in mind. In fact, like I actually kind of struggle with the description part of novels. And so in
Yeah.
a lot of ways, it was a lot of fun and freeing to have you do that for me. You know, it's
Yeah.
like I can just give the words to the ducks and you can figure out what it looks like, you know,
Yeah.
and you did a great job of really capturing the essence of what I was hoping for, even though I didn't really fully realize what it was, you know, is that some of the pages you turned in were just hilarious and I was laughing
Yeah.
out loud. So, but
Yeah, there were some moments where I'd be out like walking and stuff and I'd go, idea. And then I was like, okay, I gotta remember this. So I'd like kind of like jot it down in like my notes on my phone and be like, okay, okay, we're good.
so medium wise, I know you talked about
Mhm.
drawing at one point and obviously about like a digital tablet and that kind of thing. Do you have a preference in terms of mediums? Like, is there one that's your favorite or your default?
That's kind of hard to say, especially because even now I do a bunch of like mixed media where I'll do digital and then I'll do like paintings. Um, right now I am actually focusing on painting for the month. I'm painting, ironically enough, a bunch of silly animals with different facial expressions or a
I've
different
loved
feature
watching
to
those
them.
on TikTok and Instagram.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And that's in preparation to like put up a sale at the coffee shop. So I'm just like, okay, wouldn't it be really funny to have a wall that's just a bunch of silly animals so that way when the people come in they go, "Huh?" And I go, "Yeah." Um, but I think I do enjoy my digital art because the nice thing about that is there's always an undo button
Sure.
versus painting. I have to like go over it again and go, okay, that's not there, guys, right? You don't see this. Versus like digital, I can just go, oh, it's gone. It would never happen. So I don't know. I guess I'm just like really in between those two. Um, In terms of traditional medium, I really like working with acrylic or gouache. I've kind of dabbled my way into oils, but I haven't been hooked on it yet, only because of like the cleanup with it is just so intensive.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah. I am. I imagine too, it probably depends on what you're doing, you
Yeah.
know, that like and I agree, even from just like I don't know, my rudimentary usings of like GIMP or Photoshop or
Yeah.
whatever, that it's freeing to be able to try something, you know, oh, I'll apply
Yes.
this filter and see what happens. Oh, no, I don't like it, you know.
Mhm.
Whereas like you said, if I was drawing or spending hours painting, I wouldn't want to just do a wash on it and be like, oh no, I want to undo that, you know.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to hear you say gouaches because that is something. So I was an art history student
Mhm.
once upon a time, and I had never, if I had heard the word gouache, I didn't know what it was. I didn't, maybe I pretended. And then wasn't until last year that I was researching this artist who primarily painted in gouaches. And I was
Mhm.
like, what the hell is a gouache? Like I had no idea. And I like dug into it and stuff. How did you come across it? I'm just kind of curious. Like,
I
was it an
I
art
was this
class or
I was the same way where I had stumbled upon it on social media where I saw people painting and I was like, wait, I want to try that. So I went to my stores like in the area, didn't have it. And I was like, okay, okay, this must be something new. Eventually over time, I was able to find it and dabble my hands into it a little bit and see where people are coming at. And with it being like a mix of like kind of acrylic, but also watercolor at the same time. And that's kind of just how I came about it.
sure?
And yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great way of describing it. It's kind of acrylic, like it has some of the ability to cover
Mhm.
that acrylic does, but it kind of works more like a watercolor. And
Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting, and it has a different kind of look to it. And I think it keeps its color a little
Mhm.
longer than some of the other paints as well. And so I don't know. It's funny, like researching that guy was painting in the 1880s, and then I was like, oh, like pre acrylics being really popular, like, you
Mhm.
know, a lot of them did, you know, Salvador Dali did some gouaches and Van Gogh did. And it's like, why do I not know about these? Like, why is oil like the primo kind
Yeah.
of paint medium that everybody aspires to for some reason. But anyway,
Yeah, a lot of people tend to lean towards oils or acrylics. So it was cool finding like a happy medium between like watercolor and acrylics because it has like the fluidity to it without having like the gunkiness like oil has for me.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I know you do a lot of commissions as well
Mhm.
online. I've seen those, and I'm kind of curious what I don't know, because I've never done that before. So I'm
Yeah.
wondering how fully formed are ideas that people bring to you? Like I gave you a framework of a story and I kind of said like maybe this happens here. But I imagine when somebody comes to you with a commission, it's more specific than that, or what does it
Yeah.
look like?
So it tends to fluctuate because people have different ways of articulating what they want. I've had people come at me with like a bunch of references and go, "This is what I want, maybe." And I go, "Okay." Otherwise, I've had people come with like actual pictures of like what they want and go, "This is what I want." Like recently, about a couple months ago, one of my old high school people, they came to me with a picture of them and their girlfriend at the time, and were like, "Hey, I want this. Exactly. Just painting." And I was like, "Great, I can do that easy peasy." I think it's a little bit more challenging when people come with, references that aren't fully fledged, only because you have to, like, think them through and, like, what poses they want. That's why when I come up with the commissions, I don't like to give them just one idea. I'll give them multiple usually and go, "Okay, what features do you like here? Or if you like something from this one, like, we can make it work." And just trying to cater to, like, what they want and just, like there's some artistic freedom, obviously, but, like, they get the final product,
Sure.
essentially.
Yeah, I imagine it has to be hard, especially, if somebody is not necessarily very visually creative or
Mhm.
doesn't think about what goes into creating an image, what they have in their head to be able to translate it to you so that you can give it back to them has to be kind of difficult.
Yeah.
But um, yeah, it was just, I don't know, it was interesting. I know, like, for me, when I am writing, a lot of times I will give myself parameters. Like, I'll be like, well, this is this type of book. Like, this is going to be a bunch of snippets in
Mhm.
somebody's life, or, and then like those restrictions help me be creative because if it's
Yeah.
wide open, it's really hard. So I was imagining, kind of for you, I imagine with art, in some ways, parameters or restrictions are nice because it limits those possibilities. Where if somebody
Yeah.
comes to you and says, hey, I'd really like a picture of a duck on a pond, you're like, what kind of duck? And like all of these things, but
Yeah. I remember in our emails, I did narrow it down a little bit and was, like, refining, and I was like, "What duck you want?" Or, like, I know you provided me, like, reference images of,
oh,
like, the pond by, like, near your house and everything, and I was like, "Oh, that's helpful. That's really helpful because it gave me, like, that naturesque feel to it, and I was, like, able to, like, kinda pull pick and pull from it a little bit.
yeah, it's fun to be able to go back to those images and then look at what you produced and go like, yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, this feels like our neighborhood. And I mean, that's the goofy little story behind the duck book is that the ducks literally lived in a tree in one of my neighbor's backyards, and my neighbor named them, and they seem to have problems having ducklings, which seems like a very basic function of ducks. And then I fell in love with this nature science writer, Lucy Cook, and she wrote this book called The Truth About Animals, and then another one that's just called Bitch. And they're all about weird facts about animals. And duck reproduction is really messed up. Like, it's just
Yeah.
so bizarre by human standpoint. So um, anyway, so you mentioned you're creating art for a show.
Mhm.
And do you have a date in mind for when that's going to be so we can tell people when to go to West Side Perk? Or
Yeah, so I am selling my art starting June 16th through July 31st. So I get like a whole month and a half of having my art there. I'm going to have a bunch of my paintings. I'm thinking of putting my prints up and more stickers and just like keeping it fresh.
I like it. Yeah. And you seem to have a permanent stand in the store one way or another, whether you're having an
Yeah.
exhibit or not. So that's awesome. And then if people want commissions or they want to see some of your art, where would they go?
Yeah, if they want to commission me, they could or like see my art or like purchase art, they can go to my website, which is babybeanlettuceartllc.com. And yeah, I have
Cool.
a
And
bunch of
I'll
different things on there.
and I'll be sure to link it with the notes here so that they can just click on that. But I wanted to make sure to send them to your site so they can see
Yeah.
your work. And if they have commissions they want, that they can look you up there as well. So
Cool.
anything else that's coming up in the future that you want to share with the world?
Um, in the fall, Theater just released this, but I will be working on I Am Betty again. They're doing a remount, so that is coming back in the fall of this year. And yeah, if you like
Yeah,
theater, go check it out.
that's one of the things we didn't even talk about is you
Yeah.
do the designs and things for that. Like
Yep.
how does that go? Like how does
It's
that
a
work, I guess really is what I mean.
Yeah, it's a very intensive process to where like it starts with idea formulation and then it goes to like idea like actually generating to more finalized content over time. I am a projection designer for more specificity of what I do. So any video work that is like projected onto surfaces appears and I have to program that. And we have like a whole week where we just do that. And I go, and just like trying to get that in. Um, a lot of people like to think it's part of scenic design, but it's actually different because I can actually change the images from moment to moment, whereas scenic is a lot more permanent. Um, and yeah, that's
I,
kind of like a little dip into that.
I'm glad you said that because I guess I didn't realize the difference. But you're right. I mean, I guess if it's a
Mhm.
projection, you can literally change that so it becomes more fluid and adds movement in a way that you wouldn't have otherwise. So that's interesting. Um,
Yeah, and it's a little bit newer in terms of like theaters starting to utilize it. Um, at least that's what I've been told. Not many theaters utilize it because of it being so new. So, yeah.
yeah, cool. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I'll make sure to link to your sites so that people can find you easily online. And yeah, have a great rest of the day.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks for listening. You can find out more about me at my webpage, michaelmacbride.com, or on most social media platforms with the same handle, at Michael MacBride. That's MacBride, like Mac and Bride. Let me know what you're listening to, or if you read one of these books, leave me a comment and let me know what you thought. Have a great day.